Hello everyone. We are now about to get our first assignment in CS174. And this assignment, as I've said, has been a smash hit in the past. It's the 3D Virtual Cities assignment. So what I'd like to do is give you just a brief overview of all the moving parts in this assignment and show you how to get started. Okay? So the goal is really about methods. So we're going to start with some very basic shapes like boxes, cylinders, cones, spheres, ellipsoids. And we're going to put these shapes together to make more complicated shapes like trees. So that would be, well, this is a simple version of a tree, a lollipop tree. So that would be a brown cylinder with an ellipsoid on top, okay, which is like a squashed sphere. Okay, so you can make a method to draw a tree, which calls two other methods, one to draw a cylinder, one to draw an ellipsoid. Then we're going to make a fire hydrant, which actually is a couple of cylinders. So this longer one up here, and then the shorter but wider one down here. And then two boxes, and then a sphere actually on top. So this is going to draw 5 things, if I've got my count correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And once you make a method to draw a fire hydrant, you never have to worry about that again because you've done the work to draw those 5 things. So then you just call the fire hydrant method and it does all that for you. And so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to have you make various city objects. And then at a higher level, you kind of zoom out. Now you've got these methods. They've encapsulated what it means to draw each of these city objects. And so now you just call each of those methods and put the city objects in different places. And so that's the assignment. All right, so let me tell you how to get started first. The first thing you want to do is clone the repository. Okay, so as I've mentioned in the past, what this is all about is there's a website called GitHub that hosts all the code for our class. And what we're going to do is grab the starter code from that website. So let's say that I'm on Nimbus here, and I've popped open a terminal. All right, so right now I'm just in my home directory. Let me make this a bit bigger so you can make sure you really get the text clear there. Okay, so I'm in my home directory. I have a CS174 directory, so I'm going to change into that. Right now I have a couple things. You'll notice some of the things I tested from class. Let me actually move my head up just so my head is out of the way. There we go, my head's floated up here. So a couple things we have from class, but now I'm going to add something new. So I copy and pasted that git clone thing in there. And that is going to, if you look in here, that's created a new folder, Homework 1 Virtual Cities. If I type ls, I will also now see that folder. So I want to go into that folder. And I see there's a number of files in there. I've started you off with a make file, which I'll talk a bit more about in the pre-lab and what we'll see on Wednesday. But this is a way of automating build commands to quickly execute the appropriate G++ command to build everything you need. So I've started you off with a little file here that puts a few things together. As I explained in the assignment, there is a method to draw a sign. A sign consists of a box attached on top of a cylinder. So if we look at the way that looks here, yeah, there's a red sign and there's a green sign. I showed there was one extra parameter here, which is whether that sign is oriented east or west. And you can study the method to see some more of the details. And then, as I've shown here, I put some things together in this method here called draw scene. And my main is really short, so I want to keep the main very short and for good code design, and I want to do the bulk of my work in other methods. So I have this thing here called draw scene that puts things together, sets up some lights, some cameras, and then we have action. So I'm drawing a number of different objects here. Once I have that draw sign method that draws the cylinder and the box oriented a particular way, I can draw a couple different signs with different parameters. So again, this is the encapsulation that I'm talking about. I don't have to worry about the details of drawing the sign at this level. I can just call the method I've made. Then there's a couple other methods there, which I explain in the write-up, but You can add something called a mesh, which is a surface. And I've provided a bunch of meshes to go with this assignment. You can see them in this directory here. Airplanes, birds, Homer Simpson, which is the one I have here. Humans, mechanical objects, octopus, okay. You name it, it's there. And so these are more for the art contest, which that's a part of this assignment. I want everybody to submit something to an art contest. And so you can mess with those later. All right, but anyway, so I can go ahead actually, and I can compile this file by typing G++, I'll say out simple scene, simplescene.cpp. So that, you'll notice, has just made this new file here. But also I can shortcut this process by just typing make simple scene. That's what the make file does for me. And notice how it already put this command here. It actually added a couple of extra things. This is to give you extra warnings to help make sure you're writing good code. This is to help with the debugger, which I'll show next week. All right, so anyway, I've made this program. Let me go ahead and run it. And I want you to pay close attention to what happens in this folder here. And I'll do ls again in a second to show you. But this just made a new file called simplescene.html, and there it is right there. And an HTML file is actually a web page entry point. And so what we can do now is run that web page. So if I click right click on this, just like I would have in homework 0 with the little animation, and I click open with live server, it will now open up this window here where well, I guess it's taking a second for me because I'm connected to the VPN. It'll take a second to load some of the initial stuff here. But this will pop up with the scene that I just made. Okay, so there's code here that puts all of these objects in the city, or whatever I want to call my environment. And now it pops up here with this interactive window. Okay, so I can look around here. The controls are WASD, so A is left, D is right, W is forward, S is backwards. And also E is up, and C is down. And then I click and drag my mouse to look around. And I can also change how quickly I want to fly around. So you see in this little scene, I put Homer Simpson. I made him yellow. I also made a smokestack. So this is something that I worked on with a student, Soraya Kutai. We actually got some drone footage from somebody who flew a drone around this. And we stitched together the pictures into a 3D model. But I've provided this 3D model with the assignment, so you can have fun with it. Although that's not the main purpose of the assignment for the smokestack. I want you to have fun with some other city objects like I mentioned. So maybe I'll just draw one more thing and show you how this all updates. Once you launch the live server, if you keep this open, it'll refresh. It'll come back up much more quickly. So let's say that I wanted to add another box. Or actually, I don't know. Maybe I'll add something different. Okay, so if I go back to this page, I have some documentation that goes along with all the different things that you can draw. And this is something that I want you to learn in this class, is reading documentation that describes other people's codes. So let's say that I wanted to draw a cylinder, okay? And I say, click here to view documentation for drawing an axis aligned cylinder. So I click on that link, I go there, and I see, okay, there's an add cylinder method. And it takes a bunch of parameters because there's a lot of degrees of freedom. There's a lot of ways that I can vary properties of the cylinder. But the first three parameters are telling me the X, Y, and Z coordinates of where I want the cylinder to be centered. Then I have the radius of the cylinder, the height of the cylinder. And then the red, the green, and the blue. And as I explain here, you can describe a color with three numbers: red, green, and blue. So we actually perceive color in 3D, which is a bit interesting. And these numbers vary between 0 and 255. So 255, 0, 0, that's everything in red, nothing in green, nothing in blue. On the other hand, if I do this is almost all blue up here. Nothing in red, very little in green. Remember, this goes from 0 to 255. And then everything in blue. Okay, so and you can see you can drag this around and choose different colors. And those come parameters that you pass in. So let's say maybe I wanted to make an orange type cylinder. So I like this color. This is 247, 145, 18. So we got to remember that. 247, 145, 18. 247, 145, 18. Did I get that? Yes, I did. All right, so looking back at the cylinder documentation, let me put these side by side actually, so I can see what I'm doing. So there's a method called add cylinder, which is part of the scene class. I'll talk more about classes and objects later, but for now, all you need to know is you just say scene.add cylinder. Okay, and actually it tells me the parameters here too. It actually pops up with some help. So I guess you don't necessarily have to look at the documentation here unless you want a description of what these parameters are. I will keep that open because I want to return to it in a second. But yeah, looking at the hints I have here, okay, center and X. Let's say I'll put it 0 and X. Maybe I'll have it floating up a little bit in Y, so maybe 10 units up. I'll put it in front of me in Z, which is actually a negative Z, if you look at the coordinate system I've set up to keep it right-handed, turns out. Maybe I'll put it maybe about 5 ahead of me in Z. The radius, I'll make it maybe 0.5. The height, I'll make it 4, let's say. So it'll be a thin cylinder relative to the radius. RGB, as I said, it was 247. So I see I'm on R now. G is 145. B is 18. And then I have these two parameters, roughness. Oh, I guess it pops up with the documentation here too. See, Visual Studio Code is great. Okay, roughness, how rough the material appears to be. So maybe I'll make it as 1 actually, so it's fully diffuse, so it doesn't look too shiny. And then there's this parameter metalness, how much of the material is like a metal. If we want it to be like a wood or stone, we make it 0. Well, let's make it 1. We'll make it like metal. Okay, so now I've just made this change. What I'm going to do is type make. That's going to call the G++ again, and I just rebuilt this thing. So now let me go up, and I'm going to run Simple Scene again. And if you notice in the background, this page has refreshed. And actually, I see my little orange cylinder. Well, it's a little bit darker than orange because the lights are dark. But you notice how that was. I kept this web page open, and it just refreshed there. And so there's my little floating cylinder that I just made. Okay. So that's how you do it with this assignment. Hopefully that's enough to give you a picture of how this all works. And you can see even through the VPN for me, which sometimes is a bit slow, once you get the initial page launched there, it should be quite quick to develop all of this, all right? And so what I want you to do is make a new file called myscene.cpp. Actually, you could just copy over Simple Scene. Start with the code in there. So I just made a new file. And you probably want to do some different stuff. You know, maybe I'll keep the same lights and cameras, but in the same ground. This is like a box for the ground, but maybe I'll get rid of all this stuff. Okay. So totally fine to copy the code from Simple Scene into MyScene, but then you're going to do different things. Mainly, you'll be focusing on making these other methods like draw tree, draw fire hydrant, etc. All right. So I really hope you enjoy this. Like I said, it's been a smash hit in the past. I actually completely redid the engine on this one compared to before because people kept being so creative that they would break the dinky little engine that I made myself. So this is now using something called 3JS, which is a lot more powerful than the thing I made from scratch before. And it can even support these textured meshes like the smokestack here that actually has some picture on it, right? I can go look around at this. I can even go, ooh, look at this. You can't do this in real life, right? Unless you got a fancy drone. So yeah, you can actually probably find some of these online and include them in the art contest if you want, as long as you attribute them. And if you're really fancy, you could even design your own. And I'll see if I can find some others for you to mess with. Okay, enjoy. And post on Discord if you need help. Take it easy.